So we know we can be over-responsive and too sensitive in our sensory processing, or under-responsive or not sensitive enough. But how does that look in each of our different senses? Well, when your hearing is too sensitive, noises feel louder. You might be easily startled by unexpected noises and maybe anxious before they happen, like waiting for the school bell or the alarm to go off. And sometimes these children will chew to dampen down the noises that they're experiencing. On the other hand, if you're not sensitive enough, children will often talk really loudly. They might be described as not having a volume button, might really enjoy loud noises, and not pick up on normal auditory cues. In the visual system, being highly sensitive might mean that children don't like bright lighting or bright sunlight, might prefer to wear a cap when they go outside or dark glasses, and might seek out dark environments because they're visually distracted by bright things around them. If they're not sensitive enough, they might need more visual information to help them respond to things, and they might really enjoy bright environments, reflective things, or spinning lights, for example. In terms of taste and smell, lots of children with sensory processing difficulties are picky eaters. These are our highly sensitive children who don't like strong tastes and strong smells. They can often smell or taste things that you can't. They might like their food at a certain temperature or consistency, and they might really overreact to certain smells and gag on certain foods. Sometimes children are the opposite. They're really, really under-responsive in their mouth and in their smell, and they will try to eat non-food items. They might like a diet with lots of hard, crunchy food in it, and really crave strong tastes, strong curries, spicy food that you might not think they would manage. They might not react at all to really strong smells. In terms of touch, children who are highly sensitive often either really love or really hate being hugged, but it may be that it's all on their terms. They might react really aggressively to another person's touch, saying they've been hurt or lashing out. They might mouth objects because that's a different way to obtain sensory input about an object's properties. They might only like certain textures and won't wear certain clothes because they say they're too rough or scratchy. They might be really fussy about messy play. Sometimes they won't go near anything that will leave a residue on their hands. And they might complain of pain and temperature differently from other children that you know. Children with low sensitivity to touch tend to need firm touch to respond to it. They can sometimes be really heavy-handed, almost quite clumsy, or may hug other children much too hard because they can't gauge how much pressure is needed. They might invade personal space because they're not bothered about all the touch that goes on. And they might be children who don't respond very much to pain and temperature at all. We've already talked about the vestibular system and the proprioceptive system, but just to reiterate, children who are too sensitive to vestibular processing or movement might struggle with the sensation of movement, might get dizzy really easily, and really struggle in busy places where there's lots of movement around them. They might be fearful of things that involve getting their feet off the ground, like going on a swing, climbing, or even just standing at the top of a flight of stairs. On the other hand, children who are not sensitive enough might be always on the go, always trying to move that fluid in their inner ear, might not be able to sit still, might present as quite fidgety. Sometimes parents tell me their child runs everywhere rather than walks and is a real risk taker. These children can move very quickly, but sometimes they're not very well coordinated. We talked about proprioception right at the beginning. Think back to the Minions. It's about body awareness. And children who are not sensitive enough to their proprioceptive feedback may bump or trip into things and people. They might try to put themselves into too small spaces or push against corners of the room, and they might have a real over-reliance on their vision to tell them where they are. Although we've described children in 3 different types, over-responsive, under-responsive and sensory seeking, it's very important to remember that they rarely stay in these boxes or categories. It's much more normal for children with sensory processing difficulties to vary. They can be over-responsive in one sense, under-responsive in another, and seeking sensation in a third. They might fluctuate and seem to be over-responsive one day and then under-responsive the next. This is because, just like us, our children have their own sensory preferences and will like some things more than others. But also it's because our sensory processing is highly influenced by our mood and how we feel. Imagine yourself first thing in the morning. You wake up, you feel well, you've had a really good night's sleep. There's nothing too stressful going on that day. The morning routine goes well, you get your breakfast. The route to work or school is very smooth, there's no traffic. You arrive in your workplace perhaps, feeling good, and you walk into the staff room and someone's put the radio on. And you go, "Oh, I love this tune," and you start singing along to it. Another day, you wake up after a rubbish night's sleep. You've got a headache, you don't feel that well. Something really stressful's going on that day that you need to sort out. You don't have time for breakfast and the kids are a nightmare. And then there's a traffic jam on the way to school or work. And you get into your place of work and you go into the staff room and someone's put the radio on. And you hold your hands over your ears and say, "Oh, would you just turn it off?" It's exactly the same stimulation, but because of the way you feel and what's gone on already that morning, your ability to tolerate it and even enjoy it is completely different. And that's how sensory processing can be for our children, from one day to the next. Some days they'll wake up feeling well and maybe have slept well, and they'll eat something, and there's no change in the route to school, so they stay in their routine. It's their normal teacher, there's nothing scary going on, and everyone sticks to the timetable, and they have a day where they can manage lots of different sensory experiences. Another day, they might not have slept very well. They might have a tummy ache or a headache but not be able to explain it to you. You might have to go a different way to school, which completely throws them off. And then who knows, it's a supply teacher who doesn't know them, who doesn't stick to the visual timetable, and that day they can't tolerate anything. Everybody's touch sends them sky high. They can't tolerate the smells, they don't want to eat any lunch, their clothes are itchy and scratchy and they just want to take them off. It's often difficult for people to understand why children can vary so much in their sensory processing, but try to imagine that scenario and it might help you explain it to other people.